recording in progress. So if you'd rather have your camera off, that's completely fine. It doesn't record names. But yeah, that's, yeah, great. Okay, well, it's lovely that you're here with me for today. Thank you very much. If you have just joined and you are not on mute, let me just put, I can hear somebody. So I'm just going to see if I can find out who that is. See if there's anyone who has to, that's all right. Thank you very much for being on mute if you've just joined. And yes, happy for it to be recorded on Otter. So I can see that that's joined as well. Brilliant. All right. So welcome everybody. Thank you for giving up a portion of your day to sit with me for a bit and have a conversation about what it takes to be a successful project manager in this day and age. What I wanted to cover off with you today is a little bit about what I think success looks like and the kind of skills that we can use. But for those of you who don't know me, I thought I'd introduce myself a bit first. I'm just going to put Linda on mute. There we go. I don't know if that was where the background noise was coming from. I am a project manager, just like you. I am a writer, so I write a blog, which might be how you found me in the first place. And I also mentor project managers. So I mentor them through our Project Management Rebels group, which meets once a month and has other resources and things available. And I do one-to-one mentoring as well. And I've just passed a mentoring certification, so quite proud of quite proud of achieving that. And that photo is way back in the day when I started doing my first proper project management job. And what that means is I am not an accidental project manager. So I chose project management quite early on in my life, and came to it as almost pretty much my first career choice after a graduate training scheme. And I know a lot of people come into project management later or through another career path, but however you have found the project profession, whatever role you have within project management, there's plenty of different ways to get in there. And what we find is skills are very similar regardless of the type of project job you're in or the type of industry that you work in. So what we are going to talk about today, I'm going to share a little bit about succeeding personally, a little bit about succeeding in your team. And you can see that I've got this here actually. The kind of content that I'm going to share comes from this project manager book, which I wrote a few years ago now, but it's still pretty relevant. So that's where some of these essential competencies and skills are coming from. Then we'll talk a little bit about organizational success, so understanding strategy and how that can give you a bit of an edge in your role and how you can take that to your advantage. And I'm just wondering if there's somebody who's not on mute. And I'll finish off by taking some action. If you're not on mute, I'm trying to scroll through and see who isn't, but if you are not, please do go on to mute. But as I said at the beginning, if you've just joined, if you do want to come off mute and interrupt me at any point with questions, then by all means do. So we'll finish with a few things that you can do to be more successful as a project manager going forward. All right, so hopefully that sounds okay, and that's kind of why you're here, what you were expecting. So let's talk a little bit first about what it means to be personally successful and what skills that you need to be a great project manager. First, I wanted to ask you, though, perhaps you could drop into the chat. What do you think are the essential skills for project managers to have in this day and age, in the kind of work that you do, in the knowledge work environments, the industries that you have? What do you think are the essential skills that we should all have? And I can see people putting things in the chat. So Ashley said emotional intelligence. Tanya said the same. RK said organisation and planning. Comms has come up, Brenda, and lots of people saying comms. Brett said attention to detail. Flexibility, says Karen. Loads and loads of things. Being detailed oriented, organised, the interpersonal skills, active listening, cultural awareness, conflict management, empathy. Oh, nobody's saying critical path analysis or being able to make a beautiful slide deck. So, the kind of things that are coming up, patience, negotiation, and being decisive, leadership, and all that kind of stuff. And Brett's right, pretty slides don't hurt, but they're not the fundamentals, are they? All the things that you've said are the things that I believe are important. And what you know what, if you ask 10 project managers for their 10 skills, of what it takes to be successful in this job, you will have 10 different answers. So I'm not proposing that my 7 things that I'm sharing with you today are the only be all and end all things that you have to have, because everything you've mentioned is important. But these are the ones that jump out to me. So the first one, and a couple of you said this, is I think it's important to have emotional intelligence. And what that looks like is being people oriented and being able to build good working relationships with the people that you're working with. And that's a skill in itself, because we don't always find it easy to engage with people at work. They're not necessarily our friends. They're not people that perhaps you would choose to work with. They're just the people who you're given to work with, the teams that you find yourself in, and being able to find ways to connect with those people, show that empathy, negotiate those through challenges with other people, and to really put that emotional intelligence to use is a really core skill. But how do you get it? What does it look like to have? And how, if you're wondering about it, how can you be more emotionally intelligent? So I think one of the good things to do is to ask people. So you can do a 360 feedback assessment and ask people how they see your skills in this area, and if there's anything that they think you could do specifically differently to get some really targeted feedback. And think about your behavior and what motivates your behavior. So I know, for example, that if I'm in a meeting and I'm very well prepared, I can be super confident, lead the meeting, be assertive, and all the rest of it. If I have been back to back in calls all day and I've come to this meeting, I'm supposed to be chairing it, but I'm not really on top of the brief because it's been a massive rush. I haven't really had enough time to look through the agenda properly. I'll have to turn up and wing it. It makes me feel very uncomfortable, and I'm less assertive. I'm less good at chairing meetings in that situation. So the takeaway for that, for my behaviour there, is being prepared makes me a better meeting chair. And if you can think through, how do I feel about this? What's my motivation? Am I scared of this interaction? Am I trying to avoid this conflict? Do I find that person really difficult to work with because I heard on the grapevine they said something about me 3 years ago and I've never got over it? Whatever it might be, let's think about those motivations, and that can help shape behavior. I think it's also worth considering the motivations for other people's behavior, because often we think, oh, she looked at me funny, or they were rude in that meeting, and it's really nothing to do with you at all. They might be having a bad day. Their child might be going through something at school. They might have caring responsibilities or something else happening outside of work, perhaps even something else happening outside of your project, but within work. So it's really important that if we can, we think critically about how people's behavior shows up and what that might mean for us. There is an excellent book, which I have on my shelf somewhere, but I'm probably not going to be able to grab it quickly enough. Emotional Intelligence for Project Managers, which is in the 2nd edition now. And it is a little bit old in that it was written however many years ago. But it's still very, very relevant to the project work that we do today. And he sums up emotional intelligence in these areas: so self-awareness, self-management, social awareness, relationship management, and team leadership. So if people say, well, what does the EQ actually look like? You can articulate that it's about being self-aware, managing and self-regulating your own emotions, being socially aware of the situation, navigating those relationships, and being able to lead your team. Okay, so the second skill I think it's worth having is teamwork, and that came up in the chat as well as one of the things that you pointed out as good to have. And for me, that is conflict management and managing to navigate through office politics, as well as the practical work of making sure your team have got the right tasks to take part in. There's a great website called Energy Bar Tools for stakeholder assessments. That's by Rick Moore, and you can go to that. It's free. You can put in information about the kind of reactions you're getting from your stakeholders, and that can give you some critical assessments of, try this, try that, maybe these things would work for you, or, if you want to change the way that stakeholders are engaging with the way that you're running the project. The conflict management styles assessment is quite interesting as well. If you can either organize that through your company or take one online, there's 5 different conflict management profiles, and it's interesting just to see which one you are and perhaps see which one is prevalent within your team. I'm an avoiding conflict style. I would much prefer to not be in a conflict situation, but knowing your style doesn't mean you can't deal with conflict. It just means that maybe you want to think through how you're going to approach it, make sure you've got some strategies that work for you, and we can all deal with conflict. We just might have to make sure that we're approaching it in the right way. Credibility and professional skills are also quite important, because that really helps you have a place in the team where you fit and where people can see the value that you bring. The third one I wanted to cover off is comms, communication, and I think that came up in the chat as well. So sorry, I'm just going to hear some background noise. For me, communication covers lots of different aspects, doesn't it? But we're often talking about in-person communication. So whether you're on a video call with someone or meeting them in real life, you need to be able to communicate in writing as well. And it has to be at the right level. So often, executives don't want to have a 5-page document about something when they'd rather just have a paragraph that links it back to the strategic goals. Detail people, subject matter experts, technology professionals, certain roles need all of the detail. They need the context. You'd have a very different conversation with the chief finance officer as you would with a business analyst. And so pitching your communication at the right level is also very important. But comms is not just about, can I write a good newsletter? Can I do a good presentation? Can I make sure that I'm writing the right things in my emails? It's more than just about pushing out the messages. We have to make sure that those messages land the way that we expect them to land, and that people take action. Because ultimately, communication is a process by which we share something, and hopefully that is understood, and then hopefully people go on and take action. And it might just be, I now understand it, so I can answer questions if people ask me about it. But it's often things like, please provide information, cascade this data to your team. There might be onward communication that they have to do. They might have to return something to you. So that feedback loop of making sure that your comms are having the effect that you wanted is really important. And so I say use a feedback loop. What I really mean is listen out. Are you finding that there's one particular person who never replies to your messages? Maybe that's something that you want to be able to work on, how you approach them. Maybe email isn't the answer. So if you wanted to build your communication skills, you can practice speaking in public. And I know lots of people are nervous about it, but there's plenty of opportunities in project management to speak in front of a crowd, even if that's just 8 or 9 people on a workshop, on a Teams call, on a Google Meet. You don't have to go and stand in front of a stage of 350 people at a town hall meeting. But the more practice you get at talking through slides, using the technology, all that kind of stuff, the more confident you'll be. There's 2 other resources here. ukbodytalk.com is a really interesting YouTube channel with lots of good sort of body language and physical communication type skills that you might find helpful. And in writing, there's a good book by Jack Appelman, The 10 Steps to Successful Business Writing is the one that I'd recommend, which is a very sort of modern take on how do you get your message across without sounding too old-fashioned, but equally you have to sound a bit professional in certain work environments. The other thing that's happening with our communications is that if you see what's happening online, if you do a Google search now, you used to get pages of text results and now you get video. So people are much more used to consuming content through photos, through video, through images and infographics. So the more of things like that that you can incorporate in your communication, it just adds a different level and a different flavor to the kind of messages that you're putting out there. Self-confidence is the 4th thing. And we want to be self-aware that we talked earlier, and you want to be confident in your abilities, but you don't want to be arrogant. And a while ago, I asked the Project Management Rebels group why people were coming, why people wanted mentoring. And a lot of these answers are all about confidence. So they're a self-selecting group. Maybe I just attract people who feel like confidence would be something that they wanted to grow in their careers. But it's pretty common. I mean, even that I did that survey a while ago now, but even with the people I'm meeting, new mentees, often it's about, I just want to feel like I'm doing a good job. I just want to feel like I'm on top of all my work. And that's a confidence thing. So if you're thinking that self-confidence is something that you might want to build, I would suggest finding a mentor. There's formal routes through your workplace schemes if you've got them. There's professional organizations. You can pay for support. And you don't have to try and connect with a senior project manager. It could be somebody else in your organization who is maybe one level up from you, but in a different department. And you can, things like networking, negotiation, confidence building, a lot of the skills that we're talking about are common for operational jobs as well. So you don't have to find a project manager, especially if you're in an organization where there aren't any, or there aren't people that you'd feel comfortable talking to because you'd rather they didn't know. Having said that, it's important to also recognize imposter syndrome. So sometimes I think, especially with some of the people I mentor, their skills are absolutely there, and it's very much a sense of I'm not good enough. I don't recognize the skills in myself, and that's imposter syndrome. So if that feels like it might resonate with you, it's worth giving that a Google and finding out if that's something perhaps that might be affecting your ability to feel confident at work. And something a manager told me ages ago was it's easier to ask forgiveness than permission. And what that means is just do the thing. And then if you're doing something and it's the right thing for the organization and it's the right thing for the project, it's very unlikely that you're going to get into trouble. So it's much more likely that they will say, oh, thanks for sorting out that problem. Thanks for taking the initiative and dealing with whatever situation it was. And there's very few things that can't be undone either. So if you find a situation that you're in, I can still hear some background noise. There we go. Then maybe just bear that phrase in mind. All right, the fifth skill I think is worth mentioning for project managers is this desire to achieve. It's being goal-oriented and staying focused on the topic at hand so that you can make sure that you've got the progress, you're seeing progress. And the way to do that, I think, is to set yourself some goals. So it's worth having 3 different types of goals, not lots of goals, maybe just 3 goals, but have a goal about experience. So what experience do you want to gain? A goal about knowledge. What knowledge, what skills do you want to learn? What thing do you want to learn about? And then a goal around skills. So what skill is it that you are going to try to improve over the next time period of 3 months, 6 months, or a year? If you want to stay goal oriented and focused on your project objectives, plan out your time, plan out the day and the night before. I've got my sticky note here of what I'm doing tomorrow that talks about what my meetings are, what my top key tasks are that I need to do. And you need to find the time to actually do your own work and not constantly facilitate other people's work, which is very much the role of the project manager. But also we need to book some time out in your diary to complete your tasks. So why is that important? Because if we lose focus, we end up missing deadlines, we end up with projects that are overspent, we end up with scope that creeps, there's uncontrolled changes, we end up with projects that don't have the benefit that was expected. Maybe they don't have any benefit at all. And ultimately, what it could mean is that your project's closed down before they're finished because they're just uncontrolled. And it's clear that they're not going to deliver what they should have delivered because they've run on for too long or spent too much money. So the impact of that can be quite difficult for on your career if you don't really want to be associated with projects that are perceived to be badly run. And I think there's a certain amount of this we can influence through our own behaviours, and then there's a certain amount of internal politics on projects that determines if a project closes or factors into any of these things. And in that case, your job is to escalate all of the issues to the best of your ability. But this losing focus may not be I don't want it to sound like it's a reflection on your personal ability. It's perhaps a reflection on the organization's approach to how project governance is managed. And your job is to make sure that there is a focus on making sure that any challenges get escalated. All right, so ability to remain calm. This is number 6. And what I think, I don't think we saw that in the chat, but it's kind of inherent in every project manager, isn't it? Our desire to spread calm and set the tone for the team and to try to make everybody feel as if everything's under control. And the way that we can do that is prepare for meetings. So this is something close to my heart at the moment, but also knowing the answer to how's it going? Because if someone sends you a Teams message or someone stops you in the corridor, it's really worth knowing how would you respond to that? And what's the correct answer? And what's the answer based on the project status at that moment? And how would you explain that to somebody? You need to be tracking time, cost, and scope. I'm sure you do that on your projects anyway. And then that gives you a lot of data to analyze and research before you act on any issues. So it feels like changes and problems are resolved in a calm and measured way. That can still be fast, but it's not, you know, throwing open your project sponsor's office door and go, oh my goodness, we've got this crisis, da, da, da. And then that person saying, well, what should we do about it? And you going, I don't know. So it's about being considered in your responses. Horizon scanning is also a worthwhile task to do. So part of our job is to be here and now in the detail, but part of a project manager's job is to be looking ahead to say, what's coming up in 2 weeks' time? What's coming up in a month's time? What's going to stop us at the end of the quarter? And making sure that we've got tasks, risk management, activities planned to make sure that we can continue the momentum. I've also put down here making your sponsor look good and being a safe pair of hands. And I think if you are making sure that there's no surprises, so your sponsor's going into meetings prepared with the latest information, not hearing things from another colleague, that really helps them feel like you're in control of the whole project. All right, so the final skill I wanted to share was flexibility, and that did come up in our chat earlier on. And this is about how you manage change, but also about making sure that your outlook is flexible, because work is going to be up and down, isn't it? The project I'm working on has got lots of changes. I'm sure your projects are going through changes as well. So what does that look like? I think it looks like knowing and using the change management process and encouraging others to do that too, forcing things down a change control process so that they are documented and managed in a controlled way. We need to understand why a change is happening, and we need to plan to be flexible. You can't force people to be flexible if they've never had a framework set up to allow that to happen. So we need to educate people about the change process. We need to make sure there's enough contingency in budgets and in timescales where necessary so that we've got a bit of wiggle room when we need it. And it's also not being so wedded to your Gantt chart that you find it really hard emotionally to change direction and to course correct if necessary. So there is a little bit about letting go, going with the flow. When your sponsor says, okay, this is now in scope, oh, we're changing that. It's just, yes, okay. But it is okay to speak truth to power, and it is okay to challenge appropriately, even if they're a very senior person. So it's often we can do that through explaining the consequences of a change and what that might look like, just so that it's all very transparent to people. Are there any questions at that point before I talk about succeeding as a team? Well, have a think anyway. And if you want to drop questions in the chat, I'm more than happy to pick those out. All right, so we're in our team, and we've got 3 common team structures that you see across projects. The functional team structure is where the work is contained in a single department. It'd be quite interesting to know actually if I'm talking about team structures that are the ones that you use. Within a functional team, you've got access to the experts, you've got access to resources, and it can be quite easy to resolve conflict because you're all under the same management structure. So it's quite simple for communication and quite straightforward for handovers. But you end up with resource conflicts with BAU work because you're all trying to do the tasks and your day jobs at the same time. And it can mean that the work can be quite siloed. Sometimes it also ends up with a bit of a lack of sponsorship or accountability because perhaps there's nobody in the team to go through that. Anne's put a question. Can I reiterate the way I define being goal-oriented? The 2 bullets at the bottom of that section slide. Well, Anne, I'll share the slides with you, and then you can see how I phrase that. I'll send those around later when I share the recording, which will probably be tomorrow. The other team structure, let me just flick on, that we can sometimes see of the 3. The second one is that project team structure, where the team is created specifically for a project. No conflict with the day job because you're all seconded to the project, which is fantastic. And as a project manager, project leader, you've got full authority over that team. You can create the team culture that you want to see. And it's very easy to focus because you have one single goal, which is turn up every day and do your project work. And when I've worked in teams that have been specifically structured around a project, it's been fantastic. It's so easy to get things done. Everyone finds it, we all have clear goals and objectives, and we're just doing the project. Great. But it's expensive. And that transition after the project can be a problem as well, because you might have spent a year on this project team. What happens to you now? You've been seen as a specialist in that organization around this project, and it can be quite isolating. It also can mean that you've sucked away resources from other projects. So, as an organization, it might not be a smart thing to do because your subject matter experts are now seconded full time onto a project. It's great if it's a top strategic initiative and you need that, but it can mean that then they're not available or as available to support other work. And it also means, as a project leader, you will have line management responsibility for the team. And some project managers might not want that. The third one, and this is, I think, most common, but you can drop into the chat if you agree with me, the matrix structure, where the team is cross functional and they do their day job as well, perhaps, and they have a line into their line manager, but they have a dotted line into you as the project leader. Or maybe you just borrow them and you don't even have that dotted line. It's even more informal. So this is quite good as an organization because you can be efficient, you can be flexible with the use of your subject matter experts who are supporting perhaps 2 or 3 projects, and you can pick the right person for the job, which is good because you may well find that within even a marketing team, having one marketing person on the team for the duration isn't adequate enough because maybe you need someone with social media expertise, maybe you need someone with advertising expertise, and you can switch people in and out as you need. It can also be really helpful for getting consistent ways of doing projects across an organization, because in every project that subject matter expert contributes, they should be doing things in a very similar way. So you may well find that it helps you have a common project lifecycle, common project documentation across an organization. But I have often found that when you've got a matrix team, project work comes second to the day job because their day job is keeping the organization running, and that can create some resource conflicts with your work, with their BAU work, with the other projects they're supporting. And if they're overloaded because there's no capacity management or resource management software, or there's no kind of timesheets or tracking, they can just be allocated too much stuff, and that can be difficult. So that can mean that resources can get overloaded, and you can also find that some people are excluded from your pool because they become ring fenced and you're not allowed to use them. BAU is business as usual. So the day job activity that they are undertaking. So for example, if it's a marketing person again, their day job would be to carry out marketing activities based on whatever campaign, and perhaps they're only advising you on how you're going to set up a social media profile for the new company that you're launching, or launching a new product line and you want some Facebook ads made. That's a project task that is separate to their normal day-to-day responsibilities. So this is, it's fine to say that there's 3 different structures, but in reality, org charts can end up being quite messy. So in this one, it's just a fake structure, but you've got a project board there made up of your project sponsor and some other people. You've got your project manager looking after 3 work streams: IT, marketing, and training. And then you've also got people sitting on the outside. So you've got your PMO manager, who might need to be an important part of the team to provide assurance. And then you've got some other people sitting around the edge, like a lawyer, who perhaps we only bring in at the beginning to sort out a contract. Maybe we bring in quality, but they're not part of the team because they're providing an independent service. So your team and your organization structure, your team sheet, your list of people involved, stakeholder matrix, can be more complicated than just saying that those are the only 3. So I would say, which one of those works best for you? So of the projectized, the functional, or a matrix organization, which one do you feel is where you're in at the moment? So drop me a message in the chat. Oh, okay, let's see what you're saying. Stephanie says matrix teams, but the project manager doesn't get to pick the person. Yes, it's often the line manager who picks. And look at you all saying matrix. Brilliant. Yes, and that's very common, isn't it? You if you read something like Pinbot Guide that says one of the responsibilities of a project manager is to source the team, that's a joke. You never get to source your team. You don't get to handpick people unless you've got a massive budget and you can buy in the resource and recruit people. You just get who's not busy, and you have to you have to live with that. So Jessie said project team, a project structure. So that's interesting, and yeah, good. So if you think about it, really, you've got this continuum. It's often not as black and white as saying this is exactly how we do it. So there's a sense that in certain structures, you've got high line manager authority. In others, you've got high project manager authority. Some resources are multifunctional, some are dedicated to your project. You might have a mixture of both. And then you've got this sliding scale of how much authority the line manager has versus the project manager, and how multi-skilled your project resources are against how dedicated they are to you. And somewhere on that chart, you'll probably find your project team. So making your team work, if you're thinking of team success and working successfully within the organization, you want that clear org structure, you want roles and responsibilities, you need to think about the organizational culture, which is hard if you're brand new into a role because you haven't been there long enough. And you have to have a way of managing task allocation and workload so that your team are not overloaded, whether they are half on operational tasks and half on your project, or whatever split that might look like. And it's really important to celebrate success. The amount of people I talk to and you say, when did you last celebrate success? And life is so busy, it's really hard to find the time to do that. All right, so let me just check these last chat things. Yeah, great comments in the chat. Thank you for contributing there. All right, so the third thing we were talking about is how do we succeed being a successful project manager within our organization? And for me, it's about understanding strategy. That is your ultimate secret to success. And what that looks like is outcomes. The outcomes matter. So project managers who want to contribute to the business have to do more than just the delivery. And I don't mean spend extra hours. I don't mean do more tasks. I just mean make that connection between what you've been asked to do and what outcomes that gives you for the organization. So that is your strategic link between your project and the goals or the vision of the organization. And hopefully that should be relatively straightforward, because hopefully maybe you have a portfolio office and they are aligning projects to strategy. It should be quite easy to see that link. But I've also worked in organizations where we haven't had a published strategic plan. We haven't had a 5-year plan or a vision of where we need to be in the future. And then it can be quite hard to think, well, how is this important? What am I delivering? But it's completely okay to ask those questions, because somebody put a business case together about this project. So someone cares enough about it and think it fits within the organization. You want to also secure support, and understanding the strategy really helps you do that, because it's a very easy sell when you can tell a senior stakeholder that their involvement helps deliver some bit of organizational strategy. So that helps you frame your communication, frame your requests in a way that's more likely to build support, because instead of saying, I need Fred for 2 weeks next Friday to do some stuff on this project, you can say, we've identified that your organization is really your department's really critical in helping us achieve this strategic objective, which is being delivered through the mechanism of my project, and it'd be great to have Fred's support. What do you think? And hopefully, if it's a strategically important project, that message is quite easy to do. Now, not all projects will be strategically important, because some people have to work on the projects that are not. But even so, if there's a link back in any way to something bigger than just I need someone to do a task, then it's worth understanding that so you can communicate it better. Understanding the organizational strategy and how your project fits in also helps you build morale in the team, because people like to feel that they're part of something bigger. They're part of something meaningful. And if it's in the interest of organizational strategy, it's often easier to say, oh, well, we're changing direction because we're trying out this new thing, or because it aligns better to this strategic pillar, or we want to change something in a way that better underpins our ways of working, instead of just, oh, well, my sponsor, she changed her mind again and now we're doing it like this. So it's a different type of messaging. And again, it might not work on every project, but if you can make these connections back to the bigger picture, I think it really helps people feel that their work is valued and meaningful. I think being business savvy is good for your career, because as you move up the ranks, or even even junior project managers, new entrants to the profession end up working with executives, and they care about KPIs, they care about targets, the profit and loss of a department or of the organization overall. They care about those strategic goals. And in my experience, executives care a little bit less about the fact that your risk log looks really pretty or that your Gantt chart is up to date. And what we need to do is be able to communicate our projects. You still need the risk log, you still need the Gantt chart, if that's the way that you're managing your project, but you need to be able to communicate those things in a way that speaks to the things that execs care about. So how does it track against KPIs? When do they get the benefits? How does it affect the profit? What does it mean for the bottom line? And you can use those opportunities to talk to them in ways that are meaningful for them, as well as saying, okay, now let's get into the detail. Let me pull up my Gantt chart. I'll show you where we are, and I'll give you a quick overview of the things that are on the critical path for the next 3 weeks, if they are interested in getting into the detail. Some of them are, but you're sort of framing it at the beginning with a bigger picture view. So if you're thinking that being business savvy is something you'd like to do more of, then you can ask people, what information do you need? Every company is different, every team is different, but we want to be communicating things that are meaningful, that help them make decisions. So often it's things like estimate to complete, how much budget have we spent, how much budget is left. They're quite common measures. People care about time and they care about money. You can also rely on your project management software for data. So try to avoid doing any sort of manual number crunching if you can, but GIGO, garbage in, garbage out. If your systems don't have the right information or your estimates are rubbish, whatever reporting you pull out, however beautiful your dashboard might look, data is going to be unreliable. So it's really important if you're going to use that you are very confident in the content that's going into it. I also think it's worth being prepared to create those ad hoc reports, because often people will say, your sponsor, I'm presenting to the exec next week, or there's a board meeting about so-and-so, or I've been asked to go and talk to so-and-so's team about our project. Can you make me a slide? Can you give me an overview? And you need to be able to create something ad hoc outside of your normal standard reporting, but drawing on those reports if you can, so you don't have to duplicate work. Maybe it's a slide, maybe it's a couple of slides or a page, but A4, I think some of the people on the phone on the call are not in countries that would use A4. That's probably like US letter style paper to you. Well, A4 is a sort of UK European paper size. And being able to sort of respond to those queries from your senior leaders as they come in. All right, so I wanted to finish off before we go to questions with some things that you can do, some practical things, because I've talked a lot about different skills, different things that you could take away and do. And I wanted to break down a few bits and pieces that you could use very practically tomorrow back at work as things you could act on. And my first suggestion is that you read your company's annual reports. If they don't publish an annual report, maybe there's a strategic plan. And if it's publicly available, great. If it's not, then ask your manager. See what details of the strategy can be shared with you. How do your personal objectives at work link back to the bigger picture? So even that's a way in to have this conversation. Because basically you can't do any of this strategic alignment or big picture communication or engaging with your execs if you don't know what the strategy is. So the first step, if you're uncertain, is to find it out, and it's often published in the annual report. Once you've got that, you can make the connection to your project's objectives. So you're trying to draw that line between your project and the overall goals. And if it's not a strategic report, it might be your company's values that you can link it to. It might be the key performance indicators, the key measures that there's a particular phrase, isn't there, that's gone out of my mind, the one that technology companies use, of measures that they report against. OKRs, that's what I'm thinking of. So maybe it's linking to OKRs, objectives and key results. Whatever it is, how do you link your project to this bigger picture? And hopefully that means that you'll see how your project helps the company move forward. And that underpins a lot of the way that we can communicate with our stakeholders. I also think you can create an action plan for your personal development. So you join this webinar probably to learn a little bit more about what makes a successful project manager, and I've shared what I think my ideas are for successful project management. And you can take away some of the things that I've talked about, put them on your professional development plan, or maybe I've sparked an idea and you've thought, I don't quite agree with that, but if I did this, or if I took it off in a different direction, then that would help me. Then that's something that you can go on your professional development plan. And as I said earlier, skills, knowledge, experience, what are you going to develop to become even more successful in the role that you've currently got? And that might be training, that might be mentoring, that might be support, that might be joining us in the Project Management Rebels community. And then you have to put a plan in place to actually do it. So once you've set your goal, great, but what does that look like next? What's your next step? Who do you need to get on board to support you with that? And there's a free career planner as well if you want to start writing some of this stuff down in a structured way. rebelsguidetopm.com/resources will take you to the resource library, and in there is a fillable PDF that you can download and complete. All right, so today we've talked about succeeding personally as the key competencies for project managers. We've talked about making your team work and how you can be successful within a team structure. And we've talked a bit about organizational success and what that might look like as well. And I've shared a couple of key takeaways. And that's all I wanted to cover off today. So you're free to connect with me on LinkedIn and find us online at rebelsguidetopm.com. You can search for the Project Management Rebels community and you can join us there, or we also have the Facebook group. And I've got time for some questions. So if anyone needs to drop off, then by all means do. But equally, if people have got questions about skills, competencies, project management careers, any of that kind of stuff, I'm very happy to stay on and continue the conversation. So Tanya's put, what insightful collection of skills, loved it. Oh, thank you so much. Love the idea of categorizing your goals into experience, knowledge and skill. Yes. Oh, thank you. So, and if you're interested, this is the project manager book that I was mentioning. Right, RK says, any thoughts on tracking software that works well for you or anyone else on the call? Ah, great. So if you do use any project task tracking software that you think is fabulous, drop it into the chat. This is a really hard question because there's so many different software tools that are available to you. And I've reviewed, I don't know, I'd say probably 60 or 70 different products over the 20 years I've been looking at software. And I would say if you're talking about tracking on a Gantt chart, Microsoft Project is my tool of preference. Mark has put in there Smart Sheets, but Tanya's made a great call there. So what are we actually tracking? Are you talking about tracking tasks, tracking timelines, or tracking resource availability? There's not many tools that do resource management, pure resource management, but some of the larger enterprise resource tools do. Tanya's put in there, we use Timula for time and billable time, tasks and deliverables. Well, it's something very simple. You can, even within Teams, you've got Planner and you could do like a mini Kanban board. But I find that I want to put so much information in that I can't see enough cards on the screen at any one time. So my brain works very much in a list format. So I use a tool called Infinity, which does give me the list and it gives me a calendar view. For things that work well with other people who don't have access to project management software within the organization, we do a lot of our tracking in Excel, which is really old-fashioned and probably not the best, but it is it's available to everyone and everyone knows how to use it. So I think the first thing is you work out what it is that you want to do, work out what are your critical success factors, and if you want to ping me a message after, I've got a free a guide on how to choose software tools and some considerations that you might want to think about when you're looking at products. And you've got another suggestion of UTrack there in the chat. And Kim has said, master plan in MS Project, they create their own cards in Trello and then move the tasks related to the master plan. I know a lot of people do something similar with creating tasks in Jira as well. Kat said, are there any recommendations for high volumes of smaller projects? So if this is about tracking or staying on top of lots of smaller projects, actually, Kat, if you're still on the call, do you want to come off mute and give us a bit more background?
Certainly, I am still on the call. My team currently manages probably hundreds of projects per month, but they're all relatively smaller type projects. They're creative projects. So utilizing copywriters, art directors, graphic designers, etc. But we do have quite a big volume of them to track on a monthly basis. And so we do have a project management tool that we're utilizing to do that. but would just love basic level any feedback that you might have on how to manage higher volumes, even though they're smaller, less complex projects.
Well, one thing that's worked for me is creating templates. So there's certain things like one, I've got one set up for doing webinars, which is a sort of set amount of 10 different tasks, and it's just the template. So every time there's a creative project, you've probably got a certain amount of steps that you go through for every project, even though the projects might be different in themselves, but you might have engaged copywriter, produce copywriting brief, final artwork, draft artwork, final artwork created, client sign off, blah, blah, blah. There's probably a set of things that you could template. And maybe there's 5 different types of creative projects you do, so you'd need 5 different templates, but that gives you a really good starting point, because then every time you learn something, you can go back to your template and say, actually, now we need to build in this other document that we have to issue to the client, or now we have to build in this lessons learned reflection step or something. Change the template. The next time you're doing it, you're improving your process as you go. And you can link off to, at this point we need to fill in this document, at this point we need to send that to the client, and you can put your notes and links into a template so that your startup is faster. And then I think perhaps there's also something around making sure everyone in the team thinks in a project management way. And in fact, next month's training is Introduction to Project Management. So it's a sort of a basic, what does it mean to run a project? How do you get going on running a project and get the work actually done? And maybe teaching something like that to your staff might help them start the project right. So lots of little tiny improvements like checklists or document templates to streamline the process of doing the management. And then perhaps something where you've got a bigger picture tracker of these are the people who are leading those projects, these are the status of the project, and do some kind of consolidated report every so often, just so that you've got that bigger picture portfolio view. I don't know if any of that is of help.
Definitely, thank you.
Asana's a good tool, so you've put that in the chat. That's a good one to use, very popular as well. And Smartsheet's another very popular one that Ariana says is great for managing higher volumes of small projects. And they've got good reporting and dashboards, so they can organize it per project and then roll it up into higher level views. And other tools do that too. And I think if you're in an organization where you're effectively managing a program or a portfolio, or you're in a PMO type role and lots of projects happening, having that big picture view and that roll up is really valuable. Tanya said creating templates in Confluence, and then if there's a big influx of smaller initiatives, because it's very collaborative. And I think if you are using a tool, it's really good, like Tanya said there, to have that up-to-date status quo on everything, because people can go in and make their edits in a way that it feels very difficult to do on Excel. And so if you've got the option to have a tool dedicated and the whole team having access to it and licenses, it can be very transformational in the way that it's providing a single version of the truth for you. All right, did I miss any questions? Do I have a conflict management tool that I recommend? Only Thomas Kilman's model of 5 conflict styles. But I think I did oh no, we haven't done the stakeholder training course this year, but last year we did a training course on stakeholders, and that included some information on that. There's also a blog article on Rebel's Guide to PM about Thomas Kilman and the 5 different conflict styles of how you can respond to conflict. There's also a very good book actually, which I want to say is Susan Sherman, called Conflict 101. Do I still have that one? I had a big clear out of books not that long ago, so I don't think, maybe I haven't kept that one. But Conflict 101 is quite interesting. And there's also a guy who's a hostage negotiator whose name is Chris, and his book is called something like don't split the difference, or something like that. And that's really interesting in terms of when you're in a situation where it's a negotiation. That's it, thank you, Brett. Never split the difference. When it's not exactly conflict, but it's when you're in a negotiation scenario of how do you make your point. Oh, and Crucial Conversations is a suggestion from Anne when the whole team trains up in that, can be quite a powerful tool to use. I think there's a book called something like Crucial Conversations as well, which maybe outlines some of the theory there. Excellent. What a great recommendations of tools and things that you've put in the chat. It's lovely to see everybody's view and experience being brought to this. Were there any other topics of conversation or questions for today? Oh, Anne, thank you for sharing that link to the Crucial Conversations book. Tracy says, any advice on how to manage multiple stakeholder expectations? Well, yes. One of my other books is about managing multiple projects, and there is a whole section in there around managing stakeholder expectations. And there's an exercise around identifying stakeholder expectations and then cross-referencing to make sure that you are that stakeholders basically expect the same thing. So you're looking out for where there are mismatches and misalignment between what people think the project is going to deliver. So I don't know, Tracy, if you want to come off mute and give me a bit more background into what kind of expectations you are trying to manage with all your multiple stakeholders.
Hi, yes. Well, one of the challenges we're running into is that perhaps one stakeholder has higher or maybe different expectations about what the project manager needs to know. How knowledgeable
Right.
the person needs to be about the entire project, even if, let's say, the project is a more technical project, or and so I'm struggling to help my team understand what their expectations are.
So do you have a roles and responsibilities document that sets out what the role of the project manager is in comparison to the roles of the other roles on the team?
We do. We have a draft of that, and currently, like, the project managers are, tend to be more neutral and facilitate. But the impression I'm getting now from really one of our vice president is that we need to show more authority and influence more, and that requires us to be, his expectation is then that we would be more knowledgeable of what the project scope is, and then also what the solution would be.
Oh, well, I think it's a tall ask to expect a project manager to come up with a solution. But I do think there are different flavors of project management, certainly. And in some organizations, you are much more of an internal consultant, like supporting the subject matter experts or the business owner, the initiative owner to deliver by providing guidance on governance and the facilitative skills that you've said. You're there to flag risks and to listen in. And there's also an administrative part to that, isn't there, of making sure there's someone on the team organizing the meetings, sending out the minutes, doing the agendas, doing steering group presentation decks, blah, blah, blah. But then there is that other type of project manager that you've just said, which is almost like the project owner type role, where they would be decision making, they would be directing, they would be the authoritative person. And I wonder if there is a suitable halfway house where you are a bit more than a facilitator of the process by being in a leadership position, but you have to be empowered to do that. And that means the whole organization has to recognize that you've got that power. Because, I've been on projects where I thought I had that power, and then people just go to my boss and don't ask me the question. People make decisions, people change the scope and don't even tell me. So, if you're going to expect to be in that role, you've got to have everybody lined up to understand that that is part of the role that you are doing, and you now have that authority. And again, if you read PMBOK guide, it will say you're the ultimate authority on the project and everything runs through you, and you'll be making decisions and making recommendations to the sponsor, blah, blah, blah. But then you find other stakeholders just treat you like a team admin person. So it is a bit of a balance. And I'd say maybe sitting down with that sponsor with that expectation, that person obviously feels that there's something missing on the team. That's not to say that you have to fill it, but they're obviously lacking somebody who is stepping into that role to be that leader. Maybe it's a project person if you feel that that's appropriate and someone's interested to do it, and that role comes with the appropriate level of authority and respect from everybody else. Or maybe it's somebody that they need to delegate it to. So you have the role of a business owner effectively. So you have your project sponsor, like a day-to-day business owner person, and then the the project manager, who is the glue that holds everything together. Good luck. Feels like there's some conversations to be had. Okay. Is there anything else coming up for people today? Right. So like I said, in October, although I can't remember the date and I should have checked that beforehand, we've got a training on an introduction to project management. So that's around how do you get started? What does it mean to run a project? What are the key things that we need to be focusing on to really get a project off the ground? So I know for some of you that will feel very basic, but perhaps there's some people in your team that you could suggest come along to that one. And then we'll probably do some career planning sessions towards the end of the year as well, if people want to join me for that too. Maybe put in place the development plans that you've drafted as a result of today. How do we want to take those forward into the next year? Brilliant. All right, well, if you think of anything else, please feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn, or you've got my email details. You can always send me a message as well. And what I'll do is I'll send out the slides, I'll send out the video. You'll probably get that tomorrow morning. And if there's anything else, you know where I am. All right. Thank you very much, everybody. Have a lovely rest of your day. Take care.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Elizabeth. Bye-bye.
Thanks.